Welcome back to Inside the Masterminds. I'm Valli Williams, your host, a loan officer with C2 Financial, the nation's #1 mortgage broker. I'm here today to talk to Jason Bedsole. He is a master of the micro market. What does that mean?
So what is the micro market?
Yeah,
it
what
means
is
your
that?
local neighborhood, your zip code. Where do you live?
You just showed me some really cool stats. I feel like I've been in the business, maybe like 16 years, I'm gonna say.
Okay.
But I've never really, I saw the turn and the downfall and the Armageddon, but I don't know if I've ever seen a market like this. Like, it's really confusing for people.
Right.
It's shaky and nerve-wracking for people because they don't know what's gonna happen.
Right.
So, being a master of the micro market, can you give me a little info?
So yeah, absolutely. So here's, in the last downturn, me and my wife actually were fortunate enough to time it correctly. And I didn't do any like scientific work on that. We sold our condo literally within months before the market started correcting.
Right, okay, well, how did you know?
So here's what I did. I started talking to people. And when I saw that, and we had other dynamics going on in that market. There was a lot of tricky loans and things that are not in play now, right?
Right.
But what I did is I was a manager at Home Depot at the time. And I was going to night school, finishing my degree. And I just talked to my paint guy. And my paint guy, who's working in the paint department, making $15, $16 an hour, was buying an $800,000 house. And me and my wife were trying to qualify for a home, but I knew I wanted a structured loan. I didn't want a teaser rate. I didn't want 3 years. I wanted a 30-year fixed. And we couldn't get, we made decent money, but we couldn't get anything. So we were priced out of the market. So we're like, well, let's just sell and wait. And I said, if this guy making $15 an hour or $16 an hour can buy an $800,000 home, something's got to change. Because that means a $30 an hour guy is buying a $1.6 million house. It's not going to happen. Just paused, let it sit there for a second, and that's where we didn't know all the shaky ground with what was going on underneath the financing, of these loans, but that's where it kind of uncovered. Now, what's going on in this market? Again, it comes down to affordability, I think. When you look at the local market on who's buying and where it's at, the median home price in San Diego the past 12 months has been $560,000. Okay, so if you price that out, and really that's where I just get to numbers with buyers and sellers. How much does it cost? Well, if you're going to put 20% down on a median home right now, to close, you're basically about $127,000, and your payment is going to be the high 2000s. That's a lot of money to bring to the table, and a lot of people don't have it. So let's say there's a loan program out there where the government offers, and they'll subsidize your down payment, your closing costs, right? All good stuff. What does that put your payment? Well, with your PMI and everything else, you're probably up in the 4,000.
Yeah.
So who can afford a $4,000 mortgage? Some people can.
Not the Home Depot guy.
Not a lot, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's where, again, I think it comes back to affordability. And you look at the pockets on where things are turning and selling. We just looked at Hillcrest and Mission Hills area, right? 50% up in listings versus LY, right? 26% up in sales, closed sales so far to April this year. And their price point is down 11% to LY. So I think when things are priced right, they're still going to sell on the market, but some things are still trying to find where that price is right. I think long term, you're going to see a downward trend. But what
like how long term?
I could see in the next year or two, because here's what's coming up is the election, right? And elections always, I used to work in retail. I'm a retail guy, grew up in retail 15 years, past 2.5 years been in real estate, right? But when I was in retail, every time there's an election cycle, kind of people's trends, they don't make any less money. Nothing changes in their life. It's just all mental. Like, you hear all this negative and bad stuff, and people stop spending money. Like in retail, like stop buying shirts and pants.
I am guilty. I have the most savings I've ever had in my life right now.
Oh, and the thing is,
I won't even buy a new shirt.
They hold, So I'm wondering what next year is going to do, and any kind of like negative sentiment that comes out of that year in politics, how it might affect real estate. I think the Fed leveraging their basis point up a little higher, it gives them more room to drop it and respond. I think the market's really strong right now. I think there's a lot of good things going on, but I do think affordability-wise, you're going to have to see some kind of a correction, 8 to 10%. I don't think it's something huge. And what I tell buyers entering the market,
wait, that's important because I know a lot of clients that, I'm trying to pre-approve or whatever, and they're like, we want to wait 2 years when the market crashes. And I'm thinking, okay, like you said, maybe it will, but do you think it'll crash like it did in 2008, where everybody loses their jobs and we're all like scraping?
I don't know, because you know what? Who called 2008? Literally
you
nobody.
Did.
I did just because I looked.
I'm asking you.
I'm like,
I feel like you knew it was coming. Like,
it was just tricky. Like you couldn't get a normal product. So when the government has to create
to like stimulate.
Yeah, when they
then
have to
it's
create something,
false.
it's not real. Exactly.
It's false. Yeah.
And
It's
so
fake.
right now, it's not. Largely, that's not what's happening.
Okay,
But
right.
you do see for the entry level buyers, which is the 400,000-500,000. You see that there's a lot of programs out there to help them. It's me and my wife. Our first place actually we got assistant down payment assistance program that we were on. Worked great. Got us in, right? So those aren't bad. But I think when you start seeing that they have to create or they have to do an interest-only arm on a loan. It's like, well, why do you have to do that? Why can't you just afford the loan, right? It'll be interesting to see. I think over the next 2 years, I think we do see a correction. I think it's not going to be something catastrophic, and the reason being is I don't think there's that underlying, the tricky loans, the things that aren't backed
not.
up, and they don't.
Yeah,
the regulations have stopped that.
Right.
So.
Well, so if you're a seller, it's a good idea maybe to sell now to maximize your profits.
Funny, me and my wife have talked about selling, which is what we did last time, selling our home right now and renting for the next 2 years to see what happens. No loss in that. But
You're good because a lot of people have emotions tied to their house. They don't want to do that.
that's why we haven't sold. My wife has emotions tied to our house. I'm a little more on the other side, but either way, it's an option. You got to talk about it and just explore where you're at in your life. So even if you're a home buyer, and you're renting right now, and let's say you and your wife's combined income, you're making $150,000, you're getting crushed in taxes. I'll bet you it's a benefit for you to buy, no matter what happens in the market.
Yeah.
Buy now. You talk to someone like yourself and go, hey, what's the true payment? What am I going to get as far as write-offs? Let me talk to my tax guy. It's going to be huge for you. I remember me and my wife's first tax return we got when we became homeowners, like $8,000 back. It was like, whoa, we didn't realize it was that much we were paying in taxes. So there's a good offset. So
you said something interesting yesterday that was, the people that bought in maybe 05 were maxed out, but if they held on to it, now they have an insane amount of equity.
Yeah, they're back in that positive equity. There's very few properties that are still underwater from when the market did its correction last. And I think what it comes down to is if you don't need to sell, if you don't see anything changing in your lifestyle in this next 2 years, if you're in the military, you might get relocated. If the numbers work, great. If you've got a job and you're like, hey, my boss is talking about relocating my position to the Midwest, rent. I wouldn't. Don't buy because you're not certain. If you're not planning on going anywhere, you work for a construction company here, you're building stuff in town, buy now. It doesn't matter what happens in the future. You're going to get a great advantage from your tax basis savings, all the write-offs you can get, and then in addition to that, you can go ahead and start building some equity. If the market corrects, as long as you can afford your payment, you're on a 30-year fixed and it's not going to change on you.
You still have the tax benefit.
Stay there and just pay your payment.
Right.
The only thing that happened last time, and it was kind of exacerbated by the Fed raising their funds rate
17 times in 1 year. Not that I'm bitter about it.
Oh, totally. And they created that, right? They brought the needle out and popped the bubble. They did it themselves. That's what brought that about is people that were on these adjustable rate mortgages went from $2,000 to a $6,000 payment. That's just
and
not
they
gonna
weren't.
work.
It wasn't really affordable for them to begin with.
Totally. So now you get a fixed 30-year payment. Who cares?
Yeah.
Buy enough house for you. If it's you and your wife, you and your husband, you by yourself, buy a 2-bedroom. If it's you by yourself, you and your wife, you want to maybe have kids or husband, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it is. You want to have kids. Buy a little extra space, just a little bit, because you can grow into it.
And you said, there's still good buys and there's still good deals in the micro market, and it's important to know your market.
Yes.
Micro market meaning El Cajon, Hummel, Hillcrest, not just San Diego as a whole.
True.
Because everybody's different, right?
And you could even go to street level. So if you go to street level in North Park, you go street by street. Some streets get a much higher sales price than others. What I would say is know where you're buying. Don't set the market comp right now on the street. So
you won't settle for a client being like, I like this house.
I'll do whatever they want.
But you'll educate them, right?
I will let them. It's funny. My buddy, who's a general manager for a local car dealership, we were talking about this. I'm like, some of these pricing with homes, I'm just not seeing the value. He's like, you can't put a value on a home for someone else. That value is determined by them. And the same thing for a car, because you see someone go out and buy, a $100,000 car, which for me, I'm like, that's a depreciating asset. I don't want to spend $100 on it. But he's like, you don't know what the value they're putting in that car. Maybe that's what they've worked their whole life, and they know they wanted to buy that $100,000 car, or that home, or whatever it is. If they can afford it and they can pull the trigger now, they're going to do it. help them do it. And I give them that mindset, but I also tell them, look, this is a very, big purchase. Do the numbers make sense to you? All right. We are on the upper end of what this neighborhood's pulling so far. Are you comfortable with that? Absolutely. Let's write it. I'm going to call the agent right now. We're going to get this thing in escrow. And then I go to bat for them. I put them in escrow and I close for them. You have to listen to what your client wants.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter at the end of the day. If they're happy, then again, keep paying your mortgage. Live there for 20 years. Nothing's going to change. Market goes up and down, up and down.
It does.
Yeah.
I really like this episode because we talked about you being the master of the micro market, but it's important that people understand, longevity of real estate,
Right.
and that we said, it's a marathon, not necessarily. And I think that gives people peace to know that, in an up market, that it's still okay to buy, and kind of how to structure your sale if you're looking to sell, if something's changing in your life. But I appreciate your insight,
Absolutely.
and I really, thank you so much for being here. Thank you all so much for watching Inside the Masterminds, and until next time.